We're on air.
Yeah, happy St.
Hi.
Patrick's Day, everybody.
And happy Women's History
Absolutely.
Month. And we got
Absolutely.
Jenny. Yay.
Oh, I'm so sorry for the technical difficulties.
It's okay. You're on air.
It's okay. We're
Yeah.
on.
Yeah, we're live, so.
We're live. Excellent.
This is what we do. We pivot.
That's exactly right.
I'm going to wait for Caitlin to give us the introduction. Jenny, how do you pronounce your last name?
I. It's
I.
just letter I, you know.
It's Chinese, right?
It is Chinese. A lot
So
of people
your
think it's
character is very, very complicated. A lot of strokes.
Yes. Yes.
So I think her last name is pronounced I, but I'm not sure. I'm gonna ask.
Yeah. It's I. How is everyone doing today?
Much
Pretty
better.
good.
All good.
Well,
Because you know that we have tornado watch yesterday.
Oh.
Yeah, although I didn't.
Computer was going from tornado watch, thunderstorm, heavy rains, and just keep going back and forth when I'm talking online. I mean, talking to my team. So, yeah, so that's cool. I'm glad that we are all here together.
Yeah. 100%. 100%.
Yes, we're gonna let Caitlin start the show.
Yeah, let's go ahead and get started. Hello and welcome to FemTech Live Lounge, a quarterly discussion that celebrates the intersection of technology and the AI industry. This series is presented by Virtual Patent Gateway, and in a special turn of events, we have VPG's principal and founder, Ashley Chung, jumping in to moderate. Joining Ashley, we have Meredith Schoenfeld, Associate General Counsel at the University of Delaware, Genny, partner at Morrison Cohen, Catherine Bonner, Director of Patents at Murgitroyd London, and Francis Winkler, Manager of IP Operations and Innovation Programs at Everpure. And with that, I'll hand things over to Ashley.
Thank you, Caitlin, for the most impressive opening. So I don't know how I'm going to be meeting up to that standard, but we are here today. First things first, happy Women's History Month. And this is our season's first FemTech Life Lounge. So I'm so happy to have all of you here today. I'm Ashley Chung, principal and founder at Virtual Patent Gateway, among other things. And so first thing first, I'm going to add a little bit of pressure to each one of you. Nothing like that. A little bit. So we're going to do your own intro. I'm going to start picking first by Catherine Bonner, the Director of Patents of Murgitroyd. Would you like to give us a 45 seconds introduction of yourself?
Okay, yes, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Really excited for today. And I'm a European and UK patent attorney, protecting innovation for my clients and working in the high-tech, high-value patents area. Really keen to work alongside individuals and corporates looking to protect innovation, and I get excited by IP every day. Love working in the science field, and particularly passionate about opportunity for all within the profession. So with ADAPT and the EPPP and a number of other programs, I work on mentorship and internships and things like that. So do I need to do my fun fact as well, Ashley?
Yes.
Not very fun. So I have run a marathon, but I've chosen to run one marathon so I can talk about it forever and never have to run another one.
I like that idea.
Yes.
But I'm not running unless somebody chases me.
So thank you so much, Catherine. Let's do the next person, Jenny.
Sure.
Bio, 45 seconds plus one fun fact.
Oh gosh, pressure's on.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, everyone. I'm a New York lawyer. I'm a partner at Morrison Cohen. We're a mid-sized firm in New York. I specialize in white-collar and regulatory enforcement defense. And I've had experience in both private sector and the government. Before coming to my firm, I was a former federal prosecutor, and I was at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Brooklyn for over 5 years. And now I help individuals and I help clients and companies navigate, both proactive compliance issues to get, to mitigate any risk of litigation or enforcement. And then I help, clients defend against, regulatory and government inquiries and prosecutions. And so I'm sure we'll talk more about kind of the AI enforcement issues, but that's a passion of mine. Fun fact, my name is spelled Jenny with a G, but it was supposed to be Jenny with a J. It's just that the nurse spelled it wrong, when I was a baby at the hospital. So I'm stuck with it. But I love it. So
Thank you so much. Hey, you know what? It makes you very unique.
that's
Jenny
right.
with a
That's what I
G.
tell myself.
All right, next up, pressure's on, Meredith. Bio, 45 seconds and one fun fact.
Yes. Hi, I'm Meredith Schoenfeld. So I'm an associate general counsel at the University of Delaware. So my background is in intellectual property law. I worked previously at the government. I was at the United States Patent and Trademark Office and the Solicitor's Office. I was at the National Science Foundation. So I've been in the IP and science space for a while. I'm now a little bit more of a generalist at the university, but I do work a lot with the research transfer offices, and then just all different kinds of new and exciting campus issues. So, we use AI in so many different ways, students, faculty, attorneys. So see a lot of examples of AI usage here on campuses. I have a fun AI fact and I have a fun me fact. So my fun me fact is I got the opportunity to skate at the Capital One Arena where the Capitals play after the game. They had, there was an opportunity for people to sign up and skate on the ice, which was pretty neat to see where the hockey players skate. So that was really cool. And then my fun AI fact recently in the New York Times was very interesting. They had a comparison where you would pick what writing is better in different genres. So they had poetry and science fiction, and it looks like maybe some of you guys saw this. And you had to pick what you liked better writing of the AI and of the human. And I did pick the AI more often, as a lot of people did. So it was interesting, kind of the conclusion was as AI is learning and AI is picking up and you can kind of change your prompts, that the writing has improved a lot. I still think AI struggles to be funny, but besides that, it can do a pretty good job with writing. So I thought that was interesting.
Thank you, Meredith. Francis, pressure's on for you now. Bio.
Okay. I manage IP operations at Everpure, formerly Pure Storage. I also build the innovation inventor programs as the other part of my job, which is my favorite part. I just took an AI class, and so this is very timely. I am so excited about not using AI now, for many reasons that I might talk about. But fun fact is, I've never seen a Star Wars movie, and
Wow.
I know every time I tell an engineer that, they're like, you have to start with number 4, or they tell me the order I should watch them in, and they're like, you have to do these things in order to get the feeling, because it's kind of like talking to someone who's never seen a Star Wars movie, right? And so they're excited to get me into the Star Wars genre. I've still never seen a Star Wars movie.
So, wow, thank you. So I'm going to give you all my fun fact and not belabor with my bio. My fun fact is that I actually really love soap opera. That's because I believe strongly that I like to watch other people's drama than living my own.
Fair.
That's my fun fact. We have enough drama, right? So today's program, we're going to separate into block 1 and block 2. The first block is going to be on AI, intellectual property, and education. And I'll ask several questions, and then I'm just kind of point to people to chime in. Block 2 is going to be more specific on white collar defense, AI, and compliance. Genny is going to be leading that discussion, and everybody else, our panel of FemTech experts, will be chiming in. How does that sound to everybody?
Yeah, sounds great.
All right, let's go. First one. What are the latest and greatest technology you have actually seen? So I'm actually going to start this with Francis, because you just talked about your Harvard Data Sciences Initiative. So, can you spend maybe a minute or two to talk about this program, and so that you could help us understand what you actually learned from this initiative on agentic AI?
So there are two things that I learned. Um, the platform that they use at Harvard Data Science Initiative is amazing. It's the new way of teaching with AI. 75% of the class is basically AI driven. Your lessons are all tutored by AI. You go to one session a week. There's three that you can go to. And it's all tutored by AI. You get personalized messages from the AI tutors, who are the people teaching the class. And so it's very focused on you, your job, your intentions in your workflow, project. And it is honestly the best way I've ever learned anything. And I signed up for us have that learning style, and I'm like, it's kind of disappointed now. I only want to learn that way, and because it was so successful. What I did learn, the name of the course I took was Agentic AI Contextualized and Applied. So the course was very foundational. It struck a lot on ethics. It struck on the history of you know AI, the history of data, the history of machine learning. All of that stuff was in there, and it was so informative and interesting because it's not something that people start with their AI tools. They don't think about the history. They just think about making stuff that wants to go faster. If you don't start with that foundational piece, you're missing all of the context. And so I just feel that's so important. And I'm not, paid a paid advertiser, but this is the best course that I've taken
This is
ever.
not a paid promotion
Not at
of
all.
the Harvard Data
It's
Science
my
Initiative.
personal opinion. Yeah, definitely personal opinion. Excellent course. It's 2.5 weeks long, and it's great.
Francis just brought us to a very important piece of disclaimer. This program is not for does not constitute legal advice, and all of the advice here is purely personal opinion and does not affiliate with the institution or the employer and the firms. So, with that, thank you. See, you planned it in there, Francis. Thank you. So, how about Catherine? Do you want to talk about the latest and greatest technology from what you've seen?
Hi, yes. I love working, as I said, with IP every day and with science and scientists every day. And I think that if we're thinking about AI and the way that can move us forward, there's numerous companies that are using AI in really creative, interesting ways that we've not seen before, opening up opportunities for developments. And I'm really excited by, particularly in the fintech space, some of the amazing work that can happen in detecting kind of fraud and detecting false transactions and things like that, the way that can be picked up, stopped in its tracks before it spreads, just by observing patterns, by machine learning, being able to learn, if you like, my usual payment patterns and picking up on something that might be abnormal and halting it or making a flag within the system. So I think that's from a personal point of view, but also keeps us safe and is a great way that perhaps tech can be a nice include safety features alongside the acceleration of pace in areas such as fintech. I also think that from a medical advances point of view, we are in a real sweet spot now. We're so fortunate to be living now when we have the AI advances coming in and kind of dovetailing together with large medical companies that are using AI to detect cancers, for example. So to trawl through maybe photographs or maybe images where there would be an anomaly that wouldn't have been picked up by a clinician, or maybe to refer on to a clinician for a final view. So I think speeding up things like that, where detection, early detection, an early diagnosis, some preventative treatment, some directed personalized treatment really comes as a result of AI being used in that space. So I think that would be something that I'm bowled over with, kind of how we live now and what we have available to us, really. So those would be my ones on my radar.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Meredith, would you like to share what you have seen, the latest and greatest, especially in the education space?
Sure. I mean, I think there's a lot of different educational tools. I know we use Labster, which kind of is able to create some virtual lab experiments and kind of set up a lab. So, you can save on some costs in that way if you can use virtual tools. So I think that's very, practical and useful at a university. We're talking a little bit about language. We also use AI to have students practice learning languages. That's can hear your speech and comment on, your pronunciations, can also, respond to you. So I think that is a great learning tool, and also, is available to the students at all times, like whereas a teacher or TA is not available at all times. So that is, definitely a benefit. I know our athletics department uses it. I mean, AI is great at number crunching. So kind of learning data about, different athletic, timing and reps and, for like programs. I think, anytime you can use AI to crunch numbers or to evaluate data, it's very good at that. So kind of, a number of things where it really, we see kind of better access for students and, possible ways to cut some costs too by using AI. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for that. And hold that thought. I'm going to go to Meredith again on this. Who
Okay.
owns IP in outputs generated or trained by AI, and how should contracts be drafted to allocate rights clearly? So we're going to start with you.
I think, it's AI, it's still else doesn't own IP. The law, I think, is still developing in that area. I think there is some questions about, who owns what, but, when AI is used as a tool, it definitely should be the person that is kind of using the tool that gets the AI rights. We generally treat it that way in our sort of research contracts.
Perfect.
Yeah, I'd jump in on that and say absolutely.
Yes.
AI is not a natural person, so cannot own inventions or creations. There's been a lot of discussion about AI as an inventor, but I think, as I would defer to Meredith there on comments as to how to get your contracts in really good shape so that everyone's clear and future-proof them as well.
Thank you both for responding to that, because that is actually quite a tough question. So great sports. Thank you. Next, when is AI generated content patentable and copyrightable, and how do jurisdictions differ? So I'm going to start with Catherine first.
Yeah, thank you. I think the content is of interest, and it can absolutely be patentable. There are different tests in different jurisdictions for patentability, and what you're looking for, particularly in the UK and in Europe, is a technical effect, a functionality. Can you see a change? And perhaps in the US, for example, I think, although I am absolutely not a US patent attorney, but you'd be looking there for something that is not just an abstract concept. And so I think that almost taking a step before the AI generated content, maybe the method that's used to generate the output. That could certainly be something that might be patentable, might not be, but that's definitely something that could be recorded and logged. And to Francis's work in kind of invention harvesting and working with engineers and inventors, that would be something that you'd want to really know about and really understand if that was something that could be protected from a patentable point of view. I think that copyright is really interesting, and I think you can definitely attribute that as well. And particularly there's with the sort of branding, artistry and creative sectors, that's really come to the fore. Even I think as recently as last night in the Academy Awards, there was a discussion about how we're wanting to veer away from AI and to recognise the creative effort of the individuals in their creative industries. But yes, in some instances, absolutely patentable. So yes, Francis may have
I
more
have
on that.
That's interesting that you said that. We have specifically crafted our disclosure forms to that level of, did you use AI? And we always want to know in their own words. And I can tell, I literally can tell if AI, because
I'm nodding. I can't nod any more fervently, Francis. Yes.
when you get like a 70-page IDF and that just doesn't, you can't read the whole thing. So we want to know in their own words if, number one, they used AI, and number two, did it invent for you? Did it like expand your idea into this disclosure that you've submitted? So we're very intentional about not because of anything. We just want to know, number one, is this 70-page document something that we need to read the whole thing of? Or can you summarize it and can you point out exactly where? Because that is one thing that AI does well, is summarize everything. But it also is verbose. It can say a lot of words with little meaning. And so we're trying to cut through that just word salad that it really generates a lot of, especially in this space. So intentional about it and very directed. Yes, I agree. It has to be addressed in that instance.
Yeah, I would. I know for our, we always have conversations with our researchers and inventors, before moving forward with IP protection regarding, what role did AI play? And, we're basically finding almost 100% use of AI in some way. Sometimes it might be just polishing a draft or something or reviewing data, but, now I would say that, it's people are using AI in some fashion at some point during the research, almost 100% of the time. Another thing, kind of going back to your question about contracts and IP, we do try to protect our data very much in our contracts, because a lot of the AI usages will, use your data. And especially as a higher education university, we have FERPA data, we have certain obligations of keeping our data private. So that is always a touch point about, who's owning this data, what's being used with this data, what is happening with this data. Because if you do look at most like SaaS type contracts regarding data, they will say, okay, we're going to use your data for whatever we want. And it's, often important to pull back on that.
Wow, that is so good. Let me do the last question for this block one section. Are there any best practices for licensing models, data set, and open source components to reduce downstream litigation risk? Let's start with Francis, if you're comfortable.
We don't do litigation. We don't want to do litigation. So I will leave that to the experts in litigation who have done
All right. Let's go with Catherine.
Okay, and I'm really, really happy to hear from Meredith and Genny on this, of course. I just think that clean data, clean documents always help later down the line. So if you've got a collaboration or a shared investigation or research experience, that should be well documented. The contributions from various elements, be that an AI element or individual inventors, anything that where you're generating IP, there should be a flow of information and a clear kind of the metadata associated with that invention that might go on to be a patent application, might go on to be a design patent, something like that. You want to have that really clear, so that then if you're going to license or use that in another way, you have a flow of ownership and of rights and things stemming from that. I think it can get messy where that has not been established early on. So I think that's what I'd say overall. And I think keeping the information on the data sets and the training data is really important. Very often you need it in the patent application. If you're not going to go down that route and you want to keep it as a trade secret, again, the metadata associated with that is really important to have nailed down, that everybody understands what they are licensing or what they are not having a license to. So I think that would be my sort of housekeeping point, but really happy to hear other comments.
Meredith, do you have anything to add?
I mean, I think, I guess as a university also try to avoid litigation. I will say that.
Everybody except for law firms.
Yes. I think, I think everyone covered, pretty well. I think a lot of times in our contracts and, as a higher education institute, we do want to at least be able to use data for training, for educational purposes. And, we also have a situation where, kind of some professors might go elsewhere, obviously, which is at companies too. So, very clearly delineating kind of who owns what is very important.
Thank you. Genny with a G.
Mm-hmm.
You are a litigator.
Yes, I am a litigator. I'm not a patent litigator, so
Litigate generic. I mean, I think that AI
no.
is so pervasive in our life right now. What are you seeing in terms of like in your space?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's really interesting. So, well, first to echo Catherine, like as a litigator, I think any litigator would say a proactive defense is the best. It's you got to establish very early on what the goal of the project is, right? If the goal is to create something valuable that's yours, you need to put in protocols and measures and documentations to make sure that is protected, because if there is litigation, that's what you're going to ultimately rely on, right? As proof that this was your intent or the company's intent to create something that you own. And if you are not careful in doing that, then the proof gets muddied, and that's where you actually have a disputed fact, right? And you want to avoid that at all cost. From my, in my industry, if you're ready to move into block 2, I'm happy to go into that.
I'm actually going to move to block 2 now.
We're seamless, Genny, seamless.
Seamless.
Yes, exactly. That's why I asked Genny with a G on the last question.
Yes.
So before we do that, maybe can you talk about like how regulators and prosecutors using AI in e-discovery? And what does that mean for internal investigation, if you could talk about that?
Yeah, it's interesting. So, from the government, I don't know if the government has, deployed AI internally to run their own investigations. Certainly when I was in government, just a year ago, we did not have, the AI capabilities to do so. And I think, the legal industry is confronting how to best adopt AI legal tech. Right. And, there are open-ended systems, there's closed-end systems. A lot of firms use closed-looped systems internally where you can use an AI to help create work product, right? And it's important that it's closed loop because obviously there's sensitive, privileged information that's going into this. Notwithstanding this, still requires human, legal judgment on what goes out, especially to courts. There's been a rash of decisions and public, sanctions even against lawyers who have relied on AI generated work product or case law that turns out to be completely inaccurate. So that's definitely an exposure spot. And the courts are watching, regulators are watching. It's more right now, it's more in the courts because the courts are taking it as a misrepresentation of, case law and research. So, that's going to be an interesting industry. But I think right now, the consensus is every lawyer has to review. If you're using AI to generate work product filings, it's on you to review it, right? So that's internal to law firms. I think it's really interesting because I look at the AI industry from a completely different perspective. I was a former prosecutor. I'm a litigator. My exposure to this is really what kind of enforcement action and what kind of litigation are we going to expect to see in the upcoming years, like months and years. And it's really the question is everyone's going to be looking for is did your use or rollout of AI cause any harm such that it should be regulated, such that there should be enforcement action, and such that there can be litigations against this, right? And in the US, it's really tough because there's no federal regime governing AI, right? Right now you're seeing a patchwork of state legislation that's coming out, month by month by different states. Some states are more activist, but each state basically has their own rule on like if you're using AI to make certain decisions, and especially, let's say a company is using AI to make a determination as to whether someone qualifies for benefits, right? You're going to have to comply with certain states' regulations. If you're a company that's rolling out or relying on chatbots, right, to communicate with the external public, you're going to have to comply with multi-state, legislation that governs transparency and disclosure. And failure to comply with these rules could result in enforcement action on the state level, right? So it's a really tricky time for companies who have national customer base, right? And then forget about the international part. Once you layer on the international part, then you have the EU rules, and that's like another layer of complexity. From the government enforcement side, we're also seeing there have been actions, and indictments by the DOJ against companies and individuals who have made misrepresentations about their AI capabilities, right? We're starting to see a trickle of that. Southern District of New York has charged a few matters. And again, the basis is, did the company, during, a sale to another company or to investors, did they misrepresent the extent of their AI capabilities? Like, are they representing that, hey, my company uses AI to, track metrics and to allow consumers to do like a rapid one-click buy, right? They have made those allegedly made those representations in documents to investors. Turns out it may not be true, right? And that's a potential exposure for fraud. And so you're starting to see, the government regulating what people are saying about their AI product.
Perfect. Wow, that's such a comprehensive overview of that. Thank you, Genny. Francis, you look like you want to say something.
I have a comment because, as I said in the agentic AI course I just took, there was a lot of ethics. Speaking of ethics and the foundational pieces of where we are now, and I'm old school. I used to dock it on 3x5 cards, so I know the entire. I was here before computers were a thing. If your process doesn't need AI, why would you put it in there? You can't just shove AI into something and say, do it. If you don't know your own workflow, and that is the whole, that's the whole purpose of this workflow design. You're going through the traditional pieces of doing your RACI. You're doing your, roadmap. You're doing handoffs. All of the things you need in the on the outside to do a business document, a business requirements document. Those are still very foundational and important to using agents to do your work or to have them do things for you. And if you don't have that human touch at certain points, um, it's not gonna it's not gonna work. You can't just say go do this for me without somebody monitoring it.
Yeah,
So
and look, like there's that's a really interesting point, right? And it all comes down to what is your defense, right? Like I always look at this in any case, whether it's litigation or it's criminal, or it's a civil regulator. It's what is your defense at the end of the day? What do you want your defense to be? If businesses can use AI, there's a lot of upsides to AI. There's a lot of efficiencies gained, and I think it's hard in today's world to not use AI because think about whatever industry you are in. You're competing with other, even for law firms, you're competing with other competitors who may have used AI in a way to maximize efficiency and lower costs, right? So like, there's definitely a business reason for it. Um, However, it doesn't mean, to your point, Francis, it doesn't mean you plug and play and you like don't take ownership for it. You
Yeah.
own your decision to incorporate AI, and you own the output in some ways, right? Because once you've incorporated it into your business, you can't then just walk away and say like, we don't know what happened.
yes.
And no, as a former prosecutor, like no regulator is going to be like, wait, what? You incorporated this, you allowed it to make certain decisions, and you have no audit trail, you have no compliance program, you have no type of safeguards, right? Like I
Yeah.
think that's the most important. It's what kind of
Huge.
safeguards have you put in place proactively so that you can use those safeguards to justify if something does go wrong.
Yep.
Like something
Yeah, that
will
doesn't
go wrong.
absolve you of the professional responsibility or the
Yeah.
responsibility for the workflow overall. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
like something will go wrong. Like it's not perfect, right? No, like the standard isn't perfection for anyone. It's more about what was your good faith assessment and what were the proactive measures that you have decided to put in place, knowing the regulations, knowing what's out there, knowing how you're going to use this technology to mitigate any, fallout or to mitigate any harm.
Mhm. Mhm.
Perfect.
The decision still lies with people. It
Yeah,
has to.
100. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's you can use it, but you have to be able to justify your use of it. It has to stand out.
That's where SOPs come in. So,
That's correct. Correct.
Standard operation procedure, SOP.
Yeah.
Um, we have about 10 minutes remaining, so I'm going to ask one more question for block two, and then we'll go into the key takeaways. Um, so the next question I have is, how should companies preserve evidence and design audit trails for AI system to defend against allegations? Maybe Jenny can
Mm-hmm.
start leading that.
Yeah. There has to be so proactive compliance, especially with respect to AI. I do believe it calls for a holistic team, right? Because the AI can affect like data privacy, it can affect copyright and IP issues, it can affect like external, what is a litigation risk. Like you need to pull in a multidisciplinary team to assess where your AI is going to have an impact on, right? And how do you protect against any, fallouts, as I was saying. You need to come up with a plan first and foremost, a documented plan that actually provides for here's what we're going to do. Is your need to do audits? Yes. Okay. When is the audit? The timing of the audits. What happens when you run an audit internally and you've identified incidents? Do you have an incident reporting system? What are you going to do with those incidents? Right? How are you going to test those? Are your contracts, buttoned up such that you're not creating liability everywhere? So, from a compliance standpoint, like those are some of the key things that you really need to think about. And, you know, as a lawyer, like I sit down with clients, it's like, tell me about the business. Like, tell me where, you know, how you're going to use this. Do you understand how you're going to use this? Do you understand the departments that are going to be affected? And you build out the plan, right, that works with the company in the most efficient way. And then when you preserve evidence, you want to be able to document that plan. And you also want to be able to document, you know, your incident reporting and the results of that and how you corrected that.
That's all part of the plan. I mean, that's the framework. That's the whole agentic AI framework is you start with the guardrails. You don't start with the gas. You start with the brakes. Because if you don't start with the guardrails, you will miss. Yeah.
All right. I'm going to go to Meredith for comment and then Catherine. And then after that, we're going to do our closing and key takeaways because we reduce the time from 1 hour to 50 minutes so that we can accommodate some of our amazing panelists' time, especially for Francis and Meredith for jumping in last minute. So I'm going to start with Meredith first.
Sure. So, yeah, I guess just kind of talking about the guardrails. I know one of the things that the university uses, like for the tech requests, there is a NIST AI risk management framework that kind of goes through, you know, different guidelines for managing risk during the different AI life cycle. So, you know, we try to, of course, with a large university, you really are not in control of all the AI that's being used on campus, but we try our best to say, okay, here's the AIs that we've vetted, and if you want to use the new AI, you know, we should follow this procedure of this tech request, and part of that procedure is using the NIST framework, which I do encourage people to at least look at.
Wonderful. Catherine?
Yeah, I think that the same goes for any law firm who's or any operations that are using AI, is just to make sure that that is regulated, maintained, ring-fenced. I think you're always responsible for every submission that you're making or every action that you're taking in ops, Francis. Just because you're using AI doesn't absolve you of that responsibility there. And I think I would just say that rigorous data compliance and document retention always helps in that sort of situation where you have it's clear throughout the organization or the university or the setting that there's a process, a set number of tools that can be used, and then something sensible for a document retention and policies around that cleanliness of data. I think that's really, really important.
That's awesome. I'm going to move over to the one takeaway from each. What does, you know, each of our panelists want to give us as a takeaway from today's webinar? 45 seconds again. So who wants to go first? Francis.
Well, we know that you should start with foundational ethics, and guardrails. That honestly is all I have to say. I love learning about AI. I can use AI. I use it very intentionally, and with all the guardrails I can, because we have to be responsible.
Thank you. Catherine?
I think I'd say that it's an exciting time. AI is here. I think it's a base level operational aspect within many, many, many aspects of our lives, be that pharmaceuticals, law, operations, utilities, you know, anything. So I think that that's we should recognize that and be prepared for it, but also think about how to maintain that perspective and the guardrails that Francis is talking about, and understand that that does not absolve anyone from the responsibility of what they're doing.
Great, thank you. Meredith?
I mean, I think we really need to, at least at, you know, the university, lean into AI and accept that people are using AI. And so, you know, students and faculty are really trying to think about ways to incorporate it. And I think one thing, you know, I kind of mentioned, we have sort of house AI, like AI that we vetted. So it is important to get that information out, to let people know that they can use AI, and here's the AI that we suggest, because they are going to use it. So like if we have to, and are sort of at where if you can't beat it, join it. So
Perfect. Genny?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with everyone. Look, AI is incredible, right? Like it's truly an incredible technology, and the things that we're seeing in this space is couldn't have imagined it. We haven't even last year, and it's going to be critical. I don't think you're going to escape it. So be proactive. Be proactive in justifying your use. A proactive compliance program. Nobody wants to proactively think about setting up all the structure before using it, but it really, really helps. It really does.
Thank you. And for my takeaway is that you could use AI, but you still be accountable. Whether you are an attorney, student, don't get caught, and mostly follow the guardrail and be ethical, actionable, and be responsible. So because you are ultimately accountable for what you do, even with AI. So on that note, I want to thank you, everyone. And before that, one other person I wanted to thank Yusuf Ward from Stern Kessler for setting up the arrangement for me, because this evening I'm doing a program. So we're having a 12-hour day today, and I involved my mom, and then I'm sitting in a conference room, in a nice conference room. So it looks like a New York Stock Exchange. I promise I'm not at NYSU, but I'm actually at a Stern Castle building, because I honestly do not know how I'm going to beat the traffic and get to DC in between all of this moderating at the last minute. So we have an event at Stern Castle's building today, and so I was like, Yusuf, do you think that you could get me a conference room? I did something similar to that on an IP Talk Brand Insights. It was a different room, but I really do think that the takeaway is that in the legal industry, especially too, there's a lot of people that are so collaborative, and we have several firms, and we're gonna do like a live podcast to this evening, and along with speed mentoring sessions. So this is in person, and I've roped my mom into helping me.
Thanks, Mom.
And so that's really cool. But on that note, I think we are at time.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Everyone, we
Thank
did
you.
it.
Great.
Yay.
Thank you.
Thank